My name is Joshua Gibson, and you are listening to the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast, a show dedicated to promoting a message of critical thinking as it pertains to strength training, nutrition, and well-being. This is done through interviews with experts, high-level athletes, coaches, and people heavily involved in strength sports and athletic development. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and let's get on to today's podcast. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Gibson, and I'm joined today by arguably the strongest weightlifter in the States. Keiser, would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think that's fair. I think potentially the strongest super heavyweight weightlifter of all time, getting very, very close. And that, which is something I find interesting because I think most people know that you swam competitively throughout college and before in high school, and most people don't imagine that transition from swimming to weightlifting and then also just being brutishly strong. Were you always just naturally a strong guy?
I think it definitely came like naturally to me. I was always lifting weights like in high school and stuff like that. I grew up doing a lot of like outdoor like work and stuff like that. So, I think being strong was just kind of always something that kind of clicked for me.
Yeah, it probably doesn't hurt being 6'6" and it's just like a massive human.
Right.
Yeah. So I would like to kind of, and I mentioned this, really briefly before we started recording, that the only podcast that exists that you've been on is the Weightlifting House podcast, and I think a lot of people would be really, really interested in hearing about your background and hearing more about you because you are insanely strong and great at weightlifting, and people just like are curious to know how that happened, right? How it developed, how you ended up
Right.
working with Alex Lee and Shahin. So um, let's kind of jump into your backstory. I mean, you mentioned it briefly there, but do you remember the first time you kind of touched a weight or thought about lifting weights and gave it a shot?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I was probably like a sophomore in high school. I had noticed that like a bunch of dudes that were on the football team and things like that were lifting weights and talking about it. And I didn't really know anything about it. And there was a guy that my mom worked with that was kind of close to my age who said he'd take me to the gym and kind of show me uh, what it was like. And so I went there. And then that was kind of my introduction to just basic weightlifting. Like I didn't do anything crazy. I just did like the basic like bench press, like curls, like things like that every high school guy starts doing. Uh, and I, was interested in things like bodybuilding and like powerlifting and strongman. And I didn't really learn anything about what weightlifting was until probably 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah.
But as far as like numbers, I started pretty much where everybody starts. Like I was not lifting anything heavy. I had terrible form, so I was sore all the time. Just like the normal stuff, like, every day going in and doing like the same couple exercises. And over time, like I spent a lot of time like researching about like different types of like, lifting methods. Like, I used to look at like Dorian Yates or like things like that, people who had like all these different training methods and just tried them out on my own with my friends when I was in high school, pretty much.
And I know that kids can hit growth spurts at different points and can kind of be taller and lankier, and then suddenly hit another growth spurt and be go from 6'2" to 6'5". When did you really see like the majority of your kind of like growth happen? Because you're a really, really tall guy. I'm assuming you always didn't have kind of like a body weight that was proportional to that. So when did you kind of start seeing that like height come in to where you could take advantage of it, say in swimming or in your
Right.
case now in weightlifting?
Well, I started swimming when I was 9 years old, and I was 6 feet tall by the time I was 10.
Holy
So,
cow.
yeah, and I was 6'5" when I was 14. And then I grew an inch in college to add insult to injury for my friends.
Yeah. Was that something where when you started swimming and then you started to get like taller and taller? I mean, being that 6'5" in high school already kind of puts you a league above, most. Did you find that kind of kept you swimming? Because then I'm assuming that really helped you become better, or at least be as good as you were.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, height and things like that, like those are the bottlenecks that you experience like early on whenever you start sports. You kind of get shuffled into the sport that your body, does the best in. And I was obviously like, I don't remember how tall I was when I was like 8 or 9, but I was like pretty tall. I was like the average height of like a normal adult guy. So I think they were kind of just
Wow.
like, this would be a good sport for you to do. It was also because it was year round. Where I
Mm,
grew up was really small. I grew up in an 800-person town. Um, and so I had to go to a different city to do like swim training and things like that. And that was one of the only things that was year round because my parents wanted me to make sure that I wasn't doing like one thing and then doing something else, and that I kind of
right.
dedicated my time to one discipline.
Yeah. Did you try much, throughout, say, like middle school or junior high, high school? Did you play any other sports, or really was it just swimming until you graduated?
I mean, I think I played like when I was a lot younger, like soccer and baseball. Those are the only two sports that I can remember ever doing other than swimming. But once, like definitely by the time I was in seventh or eighth grade, like swimming was kind of 100% like all I did. So,
And to give us some context, ha- I know you swam collegiately and you were, you obviously good enough to do that at a really high level. Um, how good were you kind of in those grades when it was like seventh, eighth, and then through high school?
I mean, for Kansas, I was pretty decent, I guess. That's not saying too much, but I'm trying. I mean, to be honest, I mean it's not a huge swimming state, so I mean, I you know I was really good for the area that I was in. I was good enough, like obviously to be D1.
Mm,
So I was like pretty good overall, but I mean, I would say like in the seventh or eighth grade, I mean, I wasn't anything crazy. I wasn't like a phenom or anything like that. Like I was one of the faster guys in my uh, like county and region, but other than that, I wasn't anything crazy.
yeah. Did you notice that when you started getting into lifting, like you took to that kind of like swimming, in the sense that once you started lifting and maybe even lifting, what we would call like more intelligently, um, you tended to get strong pretty fast. And then, kind of knowing that, I'd be curious to hear how it did impact your swimming, if there was any impact.
I think it definitely impacted my swimming just because strength is never a weakness.
Mm,
So as long as if you're just getting absolutely stronger and everything else is doing what it needs to do, it's only going to help.
right.
As far as like, I got pretty strong pretty quickly. I mean, I got everybody remembers like their kind of like newbie gains that they get that first year, or just because you get strong and you get bigger just from doing not nothing.
Right.
So
Right.
I mean, I experienced that, and also I was, thankfully during that time, I spent a lot of time, like I said, researching, like learning how to like actually organize your training, understanding like more of the science behind it. So, I mean, I was pretty strong by the time I graduated high school. I want to say I weighed like 102 to 105 when I graduated high school, and I want to say my best power clean was like 140 kilos. I
Okay.
did like 240 back squat, 260 deadlift. Um, of course, I'm a weightlifter, so I was terrible at like any sort of pressing. So
Right.
I just did, I think I did like 140 bench or something like that. Nothing crazy, but um, Yeah, I mean, like I got pretty strong, and then when I went to college, they obviously, I didn't have any control over the type of weightlifting stuff that I was doing because when I
Mhm.
was in high school, I took care of all that on my own because I swam at a club, and they just took care of the swimming portion. But when I went to college, all of that was everything was taken care of by the university. So I didn't have any control over what I did. I didn't really do nearly as much like heavy lifting or squatting or pulling or anything like that. It wasn't really until I stopped swimming that I really started getting back into just pure lifting.
Express the passion that defines you. At Virus, we understand that when it comes to performance, the slightest edge can mean the difference between winning and losing. Each product is designed and tested with performance in mind. This principle inspired the technology that is infused into our apparel. Built with the intention to move with you and work for you, we create tools meant to help express the passion that defines you. The future of technology-driven apparel. Improve performance, prevent fatigue, recover faster, and go further. Virus is a proud sponsor of Josh Gibson and the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. Use code PHILWL for 10% off at checkout. That's PHILWL, PHILWL, for 10% off.
Yeah, which is interesting because the program we have, I'm at a university and we put strength and conditioning coaches at local high schools, and we have three of them. And if you like walk into the weight room at any given training session, we might have kids, doing like a power jerk, and then back squats and stiff leg deadlifts and some sort of press. So kind of what you're saying, like I mean that resonates with me in the sense of like those are the things that are again going to get you like brutishly strong, and holding all the technical work and sport work and work on your game, tactical work, like holding all that stuff constant, like just doing that and doing that well. Yeah, when you're stronger and more powerful, like you're going to be a better athlete, especially at the younger ages where there's such a difference. I don't know how it was when you got into college, how much of a difference there was between maybe you and like the next guy in terms of the weight room work, but I'm sure at the high school level it was very different.
Uh, I would say that the biggest difference was definitely in college. I definitely weightlifted way more. It was clear in high school than anybody else that I was on the team with. I was a lot bigger for a swimmer. I remember being at SEC championships. I was in the finals, and I think I outweighed the second heaviest guy by like 45 pounds or
Wow.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a lot bigger. Um, but when because we went to college, that was a lot of those guys' first times lifting weights, and I had already been lifting weights for like 2.5 years by the time I got to college. Because a lot of the really good swimmers in the nation, they kind of only did swimming. There wasn't as much emphasis even back then, only like 10 years ago, on dry land strength and conditioning as there is even now.
Right. What was the? Do you remember what the strength and conditioning program was like, or who was
Uh,
running it?
yeah, I mean, lots of dry land style training was a lot of the conditioning part. Lots of hills, things like that, stairs. But as far as like strength and conditioning, um, most of it was like stability, position. Not too much like I didn't do any really power cleans or any explosive lifts. A couple of deadlifts, but college loves to use the trap bar, so I did mostly like trap
Yeah.
bar deadlift.
Right.
Um, and then lots of just like bodybuilding stuff, like shoulders, back extensions, like just the normal, just the normal strength and conditioning stuff.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel like your performance changed much, kind of from freshman year to when you stopped swimming? Like, how much do you feel like you? I don't want to say like improved, but like how much did your performance change?
Well, I mean, I would say that when by the time I got to college, I all of a sudden was having to deal with doing way more volume than I had done before. Um, I had never done like doubles or like anything like that, just because I had to go to a different town when I was
Right.
growing up to swim. So I didn't go twice a day. So I had to kind of take down the strength training when I was in college just because I was having to pump out so much more volume in the pool that um, I basically had to only do like rehab and prehab style lifting stuff or stuff just to kind of keep my body where it was. I was already pretty heavy, so I wasn't trying to get any heavier or anything like that. I just spent most of it as time went on just focusing on like my cardio base and things like that. So weightlifting, especially the last like 2 years of me swimming, kind of took a, just kind of sat on the sidelines a little.
Yeah. And people don't know this, so I'll mention it. But we actually met in Colorado Springs at Nork Vardanian's gym, and I remember I looked at you and I'm like, man, you're massive, and I was like, how much do you weigh? And you're like 160 kilos, and you're just like a tank. I mean, you hold it really, really well. You're just like a huge human. Um, do you have like a really easy time putting on body weight? So when you tell me that, oh, swimming, I was 102, 105, was that something where like you had to try not to put on weight, especially with lifting and with training? Or was it something where you kind of have to, at this point, like, you know, like force feed yourself to get to 160 or 155 or
Right.
165?
I mean, the initial bump, because like when I stopped swimming, like all of a sudden I switched from swimming to going to the ASU gym and just doing like lifting every day, basically, like whether it was Olympic lifting or strength training. So I'm used to like burning all this energy and like eating all these calories, and now I'm not burning nearly as many calories, but I was still eating pretty much the same because my appetite, didn't change as soon as I stopped swimming. So it only took probably 6 months for me to get to like 120, like after I stopped. And then after that, it goes up and down. It's definitely not linear. Right now, 160 plus is, I spent like the last 3 years trying to get to the point where I could be, consistently, no matter what, like over 150 in the morning. And now I'm trying to get to the point where I can be 155 in the morning because I weighed in at nationals at 157.5, which was a lot more than I've weighed in before. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely like there are periods where it's easy to put on weight, but after you push it for a little bit, you have to kind of just take the gas off, kind of maintain for a little bit. And like with lifting weights, I mean, like it's easy to add those couple kilos at the beginning, but as you do more and more and more, it just gets harder and harder to add on each kilo. So it was easier in the beginning, but now I'm definitely just, moving the needle just a little every day.
Right. And I think for people who, people who are listening to this, that like, I feel like I know Keiser and I've seen him around. The best way to describe how you look is you look just like Lasha. Like, like an incredibly similar build. I mean, just like you take a normal human and just like increase them in size. Um, yeah. What ultimately thinking about like raising the floor with your body weight? You mentioned, wake up 150, wake up 155, wake up 160. Have you and Alex and Shahin talked about kind of what like that top end is going to be, where if you can get to 170, 175 or whatever it is, you're going to maximize your performance as a super heavyweight?
Right. I think when me and Shahin have talked about it, 165, I think, is a really kind of magic number.
Mm,
170, maybe. 170 is a little heavy. It would just depend. I would have to see how I would feel at 165 because, you know, it takes probably like 6 months when you're at a body weight that's of any significance, more or less, than you previously were to kind of get acclimated to that as far as like your lifting and stuff like that. Because obviously, as you get bigger, you're going to get maybe slower
right.
just from just putting on the body weight. So I'm sure that there's a point of diminishing returns. I mean, I know that when I was in Tashkent in Uzbekistan, Lasha weighed 182
Mhm.
when he set those records. His training platform was like right next to mine. I remember him weighing in and it was 182. And I was just like, I think I weighed in at like 45 at that meet.
Wow.
And so, I mean, because of my height, like you can kind of put on almost as much weight as you want. It's just kind of like, where does it start to slow you down?
Right.
I think that 65 is probably, to wake up at 165 is probably like kind of the goal, the end goal.
Yeah. And I know there have been super heavyweights who have been on podcasts and talk about what it's like. What's it like for you being like 160? I mean, because you've been 102, you've been 105, you've been 120. Now it's like 160. Do you notice a difference besides just like you're stronger and you get slower? But are there like other things outside of the weight room that you notice?
Uh, Maybe sleeping.
Hmm.
Sleeping definitely made a difference. Just kind of like the positions that you sleep in, it's harder to sleep on like your back, for instance, just because of your body weight. But other than that, I mean, um, I've always been surprised at how comfortable I feel at these heavier body weights. I don't really feel too much different, as crazy it probably sounds, as when I've weighed like 100 to 105. I can feel that I'm heavier, but I don't, I feel pretty normal. Other than that, I feel like it's a pretty natural size for me to be at. I don't feel like I'm like uncomfortable
Mm.
in my body as far as like I'm actually should be like 100 or 105, but I'm just forcing myself to be like this 160 kilo lifter. I just kind of feel like I feel pretty normal.
Yeah, yeah. And again, like you're no Razazade, right? You're not like 180
For
and just
sure.
like, you know,
Like 5'10.
yeah, as wide as tall. And so I think that probably helps a tremendous amount. And kind of thinking about strength too. I know you snatch, I think it was 192, and then obviously clean and jerking in the 215 to 220 range. Um, with where your strength is at, is it something where like the body weight is going to help push that needle with kind of like your top end strength so that you can handle bigger weights, or what's the thought behind like how you get to 198, 238, which would break Shane Hammond's records?
I think that, I mean, as far as like, just it's all kind of just a slow moving of the needle. You just kind of, I was talking to Norick about it after the meet, and he was just basically saying, every day you got to just focus on just getting slightly better. And that's just kind of how it is with body weight, and the same thing with weightlifting. I mean, you just every day just kind of has to have a small goal. I mean, even if it's like one exercise that you're doing, whether it's to, well, I've only hit 2 doubles in this weight, so maybe I need to try to hit 3 doubles at this weight. Or maybe it's like I'm doing the same thing after a certain, like let's say like after 180 plus on clean and jerk, I start doing this weird thing with my jerk or something like that. Like I think that it's just you just can't let it get away from you. You just got to make sure you don't take anything for granted. Even with, especially with body weight, it's so easy to just be like, oh well, I lifted good today, so like I can maybe be lax
Right.
on my diet or something like that. But all those things catch up, and body weight's weird because you do feel that you are almost like lifting, like it feels safer, like more stable when you're lifting, because you can handle heavier weights more often, and you just don't get as injured. You're not trying to force yourself to like lift something while you're like underweight or something like that. Because like, yeah, your back might hurt from, eating a lot and then trying to lift just because you're gaining so much weight. I know a lot of people that I've talked to that are supers have trouble with like their back hurting and
Mm.
stuff like that. It's just constant refining your movement, just like you're constantly refining your diet. It's just goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I guess that's a great way to describe it. And sometimes it's easy to lose that perspective of I've done 2 doubles here. If I can do 3 doubles, that's an improvement. Because a lot of it, and maybe this is just because most people in weightlifting are probably a little bit newer or a little bit kind of lower level. And that's just based on numbers. I mean, if you look at the series meet, like how many people are there versus, say a finals or a nationals. Um,
Right.
is it's all about like one effort. It's like, can I do more for like a RM, like a rep max, or can I do more for a single, or can I do more for like this exercise versus, can I do more for this five by five or 3 by 5 or this 4 by 2 or this 2+2 or whatever it is. And kind of the way you're talking about it, or at least the way I hear it, is like, can I even like muscle snatch more efficiently, or can I just maintain my technique through 80-90% weights better? And just seeing all that stuff move, and when all of that can move together, it kind of raises the floor, which happens to also raise the ceiling. uh, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that makes sense. How long do you think it kind of took you before things started to really slow down to the point where it was like those marginal changes that would make the big difference?
I mean, I always tell people that, like, because this is my 7th year of doing Olympic lifting. So I always tell people that last year, 2022, maybe the end of 2021 is when I first started feeling consistent
Mm,
in my training. Uh, so as far as like how long it takes, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out a best way to put it. So the way that I would put it is, like, at the beginning, everything that you do, like with newbie gains and stuff like that, everything you do causes improvement because you haven't done anything before. So I think that once my technique started getting better, that was the hard part, was getting my technique to a consistent level. Because once your technique is more consistent, you can handle those higher weights. But yeah, it took me probably 5 consistent years to feel where my technique was consistent enough where I could start making those other changes. Because I focused a lot on heavy weights when I first started because I was just coming out of the gates and I was just focusing on lifting heavy. And then that came back to bite me.
mm,
So I had to take a lot of steps back with squat technique, with everything that I was doing. Um, but I think that once you get to the point where, like, you're making teams and things like that, like after that, you're really going to have to rely on that small needle move every day versus making huge jumps and adjustments. Because um, Alex tells me all the time, like, even though I am a bigger guy and I'm stronger than a lot of people, I'm still like if you're back squatting 280, like that's still 280, no matter how strong you are.
right.
So, I mean, those types of things start taking a toll, and you have to be, every rep has just to be done with intent to have the best chance of carrying over to future training, thus, carrying over to bigger lifts on the platform.
Yeah, I think that
Because,
well, that's a surprising thing when you say that it took like 5 years, because I think a lot of times, it feels like, oh, once I learn the lifts and then I look good, right? I'm kind of there. And to hear you, like someone who is already an incredible athlete, and really well developed, and has like a long background in training, and um, a long history of lifting weights, and putting in work to doing it well. It's surprising to hear that it took that long.
I mean, I would even argue that there's some things that I still need to fix my jerk.
Mm,
Like, there's a lot of stuff I have to fix with my jerk. And I mean, part of it just has to come with having a high standard of what technique
right.
is, just because, I mean, the first people I started lifting with were Shahin and Alex. So I was immediately, everything was all about like having the best technique, and watching Alex lift,
Yeah.
there was such a huge difference between me, how I moved and how he moved when we first started, that it was just, I should have probably known that, like, yeah, that's at least a 5 year learning curve.
Yeah. How did you yeah, watching Alex is one thing. Like, he moves, he's mechanical. Like, he's almost like a robot when he moves. Like, it's so efficient, it's so
Right.
consistent, and it looks like, I mean, you watch videos and you're like, that looks like it's been someone messed with it, like came in and did some editing to all the footage, because it looks so fast, so snappy. The transitions are so great. What was it like? Because I also know, because I went to a workshop with Alex and Shahin, and I know people who have been coached, or are currently getting coaching from them, and I know they train hard, and like it's heavy, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance of movement, that like there's no slacking, and there's no working around great movement, but also it's going to be freaking hard too.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, like when I remember when I first started training, like with Alex and Shahin, they always used to joke with me that the weights didn't start to look good until they got heavier.
Right.
And the reason for that was because you're forced to not be, because like, yeah, with 140, I can lift that 12 different ways, like, how do you want me to lift it? Like, I can probably power clean it on one leg almost. But like, when you're doing like 200, 210, like, there's only a couple of ways that you can move that bar.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that there's a sweet spot where you're not going so heavy so often that, because obviously, like, there's no perfect technique at maximum output. It's impossible. So, I mean, if you're hitting 95+% constantly, you're going too heavy to where you can even, your body is going to go right into overdrive, and it's going to revert right back to what it knows it can do to make that lift, because if it tries anything else, you're going to drop that bar.
Right.
But you can't go so light that you're not even, that the positions aren't challenging. You can't go so light where your strength can overcome your technical imbalance. So you have to find that sweet spot in between where it's heavy enough that it forces you to focus on efficiency, but not so heavy that you can barely even lift it without, just reverting back to your old ways. So you're constantly in that balance when you're with Alex and Shahin. And I think that that's the best way to do it. I think that you have to force yourself at high enough percentages, not too high, obviously, but high enough percentages where you have to make technical changes over time. Because like I said, you're either going to not make progress or you'll get injured, or, both.
Yeah, it's tough. I get programming from Max Zeta, and the number of recently the number of triples and doubles between 80 and 90%. It just feels like every session is 80 to 85% triples, 85 to 90% doubles, and it feels like every session's just like really hard.
Right.
But you do notice those differences, right? Like for a long time, technique changes for better or for worse over time. Like I would start dipping forward in the jerk and everything would be pushed out of position. But when you're going 2+1 at 90%, like you have to stay back and balanced and get a good drive up. And I noticed that like my jerk tended to improve kind of just the more I was managing those heavier weights and focusing on doing them correctly. So I can kind of relate to that for you and maybe for the team. But what weights do you find you get a majority of your work in that's most productive with the weightlifting movements?
Hey, what's up, weightlifters? Danny here, founder of Onyx Weightlifting Co., a leather accessories company specializing in weightlifting gear. In our shop, we make gear that doesn't get in the way of your performance because we understand that hitting lifts requires your full attention. Our straps, wrist wraps, and belts are designed to be comfortable and reliable, so all you need to do is make lifts. Thanks for listening to our friend Josh's podcast. You can continue to support him by visiting our online shop at onyxstraps.com and using his code PHILWL. That's PHILWL at checkout. See you on the platform.
Let's see. Percentage-wise, I would say 85 to 90%.
Yeah.
That's where I feel 90%. I mean, let's see, because like if you do like let's say 240 clean and jerk, then that means that your 90% is like 216 or something like that. So I think that 85% is like, if you had to pick a percentage, that's kind of the magic number that you have to work around. Like I said, it's not so light that it doesn't force you to work on your positions, but it's not so heavy that you kind of feel like you have to throw everything at it just to make the weight. I've always been I think that, because like, for 200 snatch, like 90% would be 180. So like, that's my best double. So that's probably like the kind of, that right there, like 80, 175, 180, maybe 185. But like leading up to nationals, I only made over 180, I think, once, because like the 3 weeks leading up to nationals, I missed everything over 80. So, but it'll be different for each person. but not that much. Mostly it'll just have to do with training age. Obviously the younger you are in training, with not as great technique, you're going to have to do more reps in the 75 to 80, and then just over time slowly touch 85% more and more, and then getting to 90s and stuff like that. Because when you're starting out, like, it's mostly like basic strength and
Right.
basic positions that you have to work on. And as you get older in the sport, you have to you have to take those heavy weights if you want to make any improvement.
Right. Um, this question might feel a little bit out of left field, but I've been having this conversation with a few people about weightlifting, and they've told me that weightlifting is the hardest thing they've done. And one girl's done gymnastics, like did gymnastics most of her life, and um, was a rower in college, and then the other one like wrestled and played lacrosse, and they're like, yeah, weightlifting is incredibly hard. It's much harder than those other sports. From your perspective, how do you feel about weightlifting? Like,
That's a good question. People actually ask me that all the time because swimming has kind of a reputation of being like a very
yeah,
grindy, like, just, your head is in the water for 2 to 4 hours a day kind of thing. I mean, the training for swimming was just much more of a grind. It's hard to compare because, like, in swimming, like, you get done with like a set and you're at the wall, all you hear is a bunch of people heavy
yeah,
breathing, and then you go back. Like with weightlifting, like, the training I think is a little easier just because you can talk to your friends,
mhm,
like, you can, like, go to the bathroom, you can step outside, you can call someone on your phone, you can respond to a text. For swimming, it was just like, this is where you're going to be for the next 2.5 hours, and there's no outside anything that you're going to deal with. So I think that aspect makes it a little easier. I think competing in weightlifting is much
mhm,
harder, just because, like with swimming, if I have a bad day, I can have a bad day in swimming and still
mhm,
post a
right,
time. I can have a bad day and still even win.
right,
In weightlifting, if you have a bad day, you get zero. So it's like all or zero.
yeah,
So it's like, that's the part that I think that people don't understand. And, like, people who, I've done it many times. So, like, when you miss that first snatch at a competition, like, the mind games, like, that doesn't happen in swimming, for instance. Like, it's 8 people that race at once, and unless you get disqualified, which is unusual. A lot of people don't get disqualified, but if you do, that's the only way that you can score zero. Other than that, you still finish. With weightlifting, like, if you miss 200 kilos barely, they don't give you 199 because 200 was
right,
close. You just get zero.
right,
So it's like, that part sucks. And then, like, the counting and stuff like that. It's just a lot
yeah,
different. Racing is so, like, clear cut and simple that I would say competing in weightlifting is much harder. I will say that I like the fact that weightlifting meets only take two
yeah.
hours. I used to be at swimming pools for like 12 hours a day when I was younger, so I don't miss that.
And I know this guy. His name's Austin Brocky, but he was a swimmer, and he talked about like just the volume of swimming, like the amount of work. With weightlifting nowadays, what does your training look like throughout the week? Like, how many sessions are you getting in? Like, is it a tremendous amount of volume? Like, what does it look like, kind of from a higher level overview?
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily high volume. It is high frequency. Um, I am a big proponent. I don't like lifting my heavy sessions Monday, Wednesday, Friday without doing something in the morning. Not like anything crazy, just like an accessory and some moving around and some activation and stuff. So I usually work out Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning at like 6 ish a.m. Um, I do just like I'll do like reverse barbell lunges or like strict press, rows, like some sort of just like accessory exercise to get my body going. Like, I'll do like core work, some prehab, like just things like an hour, 45 minutes just to sweat, get my body moving. As Shahin calls it, feeling your muscle, just getting everything ready for the evening. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's when I have my heavier sessions, like heavier snatch, clean and jerk, squat. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I just do light stuff like variations like push, press, muscle snatch. Saturdays are usually just accessories.
Mm.
So I guess how much is that? Like 9 times a week, 8 or 9 times a week, just give or take. But all of it is structured around the three main sessions of Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Gotcha. Yeah. And how long have you been doing that? Has that been something you recently started doing, or has it been like the last few years that training has looked like that?
I kind of started training like that kind of right out of the gates,
Mm.
just because I had already like I was swimming 9 times a week and doing dryland training before I started weightlifting. So high frequency wasn't an issue because we controlled the volume. You know, if you do 8 sessions or 4 sessions, like instead of doing like you would just do the same amount, just spread out over those sessions and then build up from there. Basically, not it wasn't 9 just like all out sessions where I was just crushing myself. It was like in the morning doing front squat and like a drill or something, and then the evening doing like snatch,
Hmm.
like push press and some pull or something like that. So I've always been a fan of more frequent working out just because I think it helps keep you prepared. Well, at least as a super, it helps you with injury because when you're a big guy, your body gets tight really easily. You need to make sure that you're, getting blood flow and, moving constantly and not letting yourself be too sedentary
Mm.
so that you're always ready to get into to train and stuff like that. Because when I was a swimmer, we used to have a saying that for every day that you took off, it takes 2 to come back.
Mm.
So, I mean, weightlifting is a little different than swimming just because, with swimming, like your cardio is there and then gone the next day if you don't keep it. I mean, but with weightlifting, I've spent most of my non-heavy lifting time, which is the majority of the time, just focusing on like positions, like health, like healthy movement, working on imbalances,
Mm.
things like that.
Yeah. And I know that everything you've kind of mentioned has been under the tutelage of Shahin and Alex. When did you start working with them, and how did you get connected with those guys? Because it's been tremendous, kind of watching all three of you guys kind of climb the ranks since.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped swimming in 2016. Yeah, so the summer of 2016 is when I started. I was still in school. And so I want to say I was about to begin my junior or senior year of college. I don't remember which, but I was just decided that I would try to lift and maybe qualify for nationals or something like that. So I just started doing it at the ASU gym. I remember I was like clean and jerking without contact or hook grip and like things like
Wow.
that, and just just knew nothing about the sport. And I was just training on my own. And then this guy named Muhammad, who was a student at ASU in the engineering school, he came over to me and he was like, "Hey, you're like pretty strong. Like, I do Olympic lifting. You should come to this CrossFit gym. There's this weightlifting gym that's half of it is a weightlifting gym, and you should come meet these guys. Like, there's Shahin, he's a world champion, and then Alex, like, because this was 2016, so this was only like a year and a half or something after Alex had broken the American
Mm.
records in Houston." And so he was like, he just broke all the American records and stuff like that. Like, you should come meet these guys, like, after a break. Because we were just about to go into because at this point I'd been lifting by myself for the summer of 2016 and the fall of 2016. So we're all about to go on winter break. And he's like, after winter break, just come back and just check it out. Like, you don't have to, I'll let them know that you're coming and you can just try it out for like a day or two. So I went there. It was like January 9th, I think it was, 2017. I met Shahin and Alex, and I've just been training with them since. They were just like, if you like weightlifting and if this is something you want to do, like, I think you have a lot of talent.
Mm.
So if you want to come here and train, like, this is the training schedule. And I, made every single training session after that.
Why? That's funny. You say that, and it just like it sounds like a natural thing and a normal thing. But why? Why since has it been such a commitment and such like an all-in thing for weightlifting when originally it was just you lifting weights at the ASU gym?
I think it's just because when you start something new, like because when you start, because like when before you start weightlifting, you think of like everything in pounds, and so like you're like, oh, somebody can snatch 400 pounds, like, and that's like a crazy number to you because like I couldn't even snatch like 300 pounds. It was like impossible. The idea of snatching 400 plus pounds was like a crazy thing to me to think about. If you're just watching YouTube and I'm seeing like, Razazadeh doing like 260 plus,
Yeah.
things like that. And I'm like, well, that's obviously not what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm just trying to go to nationals. Like, maybe I'm strong enough for that and stuff like that. So I just didn't have like I didn't know enough about the sport to be like, no, that's something that you could actually like get to. Maybe not 260 plus clean and jerk, but like over 200, like maybe 500 or something like that. And so Shahin and Alex really just kind of like opened up my mind to those possibilities. Like, no, like you could snatch like maybe over 400 pounds, like you could clean and jerk over 500. Like, you just got to get big and train. Because I didn't know anything about like how I didn't know how important body weight was and things like that. I don't even think I knew anybody that was over 300 pounds.
Mm.
And like, I never thought of myself as being, I thought if I weighed 300 pounds, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed,
Right.
because that's what you think of. You think of like 300 pounds just being like this comically large
Mm.
person. And so I was like, well, there's no way I could ever do that. And then when I weighed 300, I didn't even feel that different. So
Right. When do you think it was you actually realized that was a possibility? I mean, because they told you that they're like, hey, you could hit these numbers, you could have this much success if you just do X, Y, and Z. When did you actually realize like, oh shit, like I actually can do that, and I will, because you just again you just snatched like 420 plus. You've clean and jerked over 500 pounds, so those things have happened. But when did you kind of get that idea of like, oh, this actually will?
I think it's when I snatched 160 for the first time, because that that was a while into training. But I remember when I did it, I remember not having that much of an increase in my strength numbers,
Mm.
but like I had worked so much with Shahin and Alex on my technique that I was like, oh, okay, so there's a lot of like numbers that I'm leaving on the
Right.
platform every time I lift because of how I move. Because I moved very rough. Like, I jumped like a foot in the air on my snatches. Like the first, like, I just, everything was as rough as possible. So once I realized that, and I realized that, even though the technique, like when I watched Alex when I started, it kind of just looked like wizardry.
Yeah.
Basically, it just kind of it didn't look like something that was. It just looked like something that he was given. I was like, well, that's not something that I can obviously replicate. And weightlifting is so frustrating, missing weights over
Mm.
and over and over and over. And just, I was like, there's no way. But 5 years, took 5 years for me to have normal technique, and probably 7 or 8 months of training before I was like, okay, like I can do something, I could maybe make a team or something like that. Like, this is something that I am capable of doing. Um, but I never would have had that perspective if it wasn't for Alex and Shahin kind of shifting my perspective and being like, no, you need to understand, like, you have this ability, and if you work hard, like, these are realistic results. They're not just like made up. They're not just blowing smoke so that you come here and train with us. Like, these are things that you can actually do. And so I think that, just that constant support, and, just that knowledge being, disseminated to me, that was the game changer for me.
Yeah, I think it's different when it's, hey, you can do this. Oh, and here's how we're doing it, and then here you are doing it. I think those are like different things, and I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in. I can easily like earn this thing, or accomplish this thing if I wanted to. First, like, oh, I can work really hard, but it's like not working correctly, if that makes sense. And then putting that
Right.
stuff together, and then also having the talent and the support to back that up. Um, with Shaheen and with Alex, and with A-Lee Athletics, and all the support you have, um, what is possible? Like, what do you think you would be able to do, or you would look back on doing and be like, I got as much out of my ability to perform in weightlifting as possible?
Man, that's quite a question. Let me think. I would say I mean, 200, 240 minimum
Yeah.
for me. That's kind of been like I know it's like 198, 238, but 200, 240 sounds so much, cleaner. But, I mean, the records is obviously like, that's something that if I at least get that, like, that'll be like, I will consider that I've done, a good amount of what I'm capable of. Like when the Korean coach came to, I think Alex mentioned it when he talked to you, the Korean coach was basically like, yeah, this guy could snatch like 210, basically.
Wow.
And so I don't know. I mean, I'd never, like, for instance, at nationals, that was the first time I'd ever tried anything over 190 snatch. Even in training with straps, anything like that. And 198 felt so comfortable. I just kind of overpulled it a little. It felt like such a routine weight that I do think that I could snatch 210. I think that clean and jerk, if I can clean my jerk up, I think that I can do over 240. Those are numbers that I've kind of, 245, 250. Those are numbers that, like, I always chase in my head. I just got to obviously clean some things up and, but that's where my head's at. I mean, I go to Pan Am Games in October. So, I mean, my goal is going to be to take the 198 snatch is going to be my main goal there. And then for clean and jerk, just over, if I do a 198, 233, then I'll have the total record. And then after that, it's the 238 that I would need for the clean and jerk. So, I mean, these next competitions that's where my focus is, basically just trying to take those records, get as close as I can.
Yeah, and I think without context, people hear the numbers you're talking about, and they're like, "Man, that's unbelievable." And then you watch the 198 at nationals, and it's like, "Holy cow!" Like the bar was moving. It was like on straight arms and just went behind. It's like it's ridiculously close, and 200's literally just a step from that, and then 210 feels really close as well. So I could see why those feel like they're within reach. This is something slightly different. I think we kind of covered a lot of your lifting, literally from like start to present. Outside of lifting, I was looking at your swim stuff from college, and I was looking at kind of like what it just had what you majored in. What are your interests outside of lifting? I know you have. If you go on your Instagram, if people go on your Instagram, do you have like you have organ meat and and
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff. So it looks like you like to cook, or at least you like to eat. So what do you like to do outside of weightlifting?
I mean, right now, like, I'm getting married in December, so I've been focusing a lot on just like stuff with that and work and stuff like that. I read a lot. I like to hang out with my friends. I mean, I don't have any crazy hobbies that are like, super cool. I have a Great Dane that I like to walk. But yeah, I mean, I live in Arizona, so right now it's like 116
Holy
outside
cow.
or something, unacceptable or something like that. Right now we're in we've had the most days over 115 in Arizona's history.
Wow.
So that's what I'm dealing with right now. So my hobby right now is AC, but pretty much that's what it is minimizing my time outside. But yeah, I mean, weightlifting has consumed a lot of my life. I mean, other than weightlifting, I really, I am pretty low key. Like, I read a lot. Like, cooking wise, like, I've always been interested in like, just improving my health as much as possible, just because, I mean, being a super does have advantages. Being able to always eat whatever you want
Right.
is a cool thing. But that is definitely a with great power type of thing.
Yeah.
You're still an athlete. You still got to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. You can't just eat a bunch of like junk food and stuff like that. So I think over the past couple of years, just because I've been gaining so much weight, I've just also hand in hand just been trying to learn more about, what's healthy, like what'll obviously help my weightlifting. Cause I mean, there has to be a difference between gaining, 10 pounds of fat or gaining 10 pounds where it's like 5 pounds of muscle.
Right.
So I've been focusing a lot on trying to make sure that I'm doing, the right hypertrophy and things like that to gain as much weight as possible and have it actually be effective. So I spend a lot of time. Obviously, I spend a lot of time cooking just to eat the amount of
Sure.
food that I eat. But yeah, I'm a pretty just like low key guy. I play like video games with my friends and stuff who are out of state. Yeah, I don't do a whole lot.
What do you enjoy reading?
Recently, I've been reading a lot of history. I read a lot of history. I read a lot of. I read some fiction. I'm trying to think the last thing that I even read that was fiction. I read a Cormac McCarthy book. Was the last fiction book I read. Blood Meridian. So, big. If you're a big reading guy, that's a fun book. But other than that, I've been reading a lot of history about like politics, things like that. I read a wide variety of stuff. I'm pretty open minded to pretty much everything, so I try to read as often as I can. Not as much as I probably should. I spend a lot of time on my phone doom scrolling too, so that's definitely there's probably like an embarrassing percentage of my time that's spent doing that as well.
Sure.
So
What do you have, like, if I were to say what are your top three books, or what are your favorite books you've ever read? Because I'm an avid reader. I'm always reading or listening to probably like 2 to 5 books at a time. Uh, and I say that in like actively. There are plenty of books that I've started with a bookmark in between and never finished. But I love reading. It sounds like you're well read. So what's your favorite book, or a few favorite books people listening and myself could check out?
well, like I said, Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. If you haven't read that book, it's a lot. It's pretty intense, but it's definitely my favorite book that I've ever read. Not just because I live in Arizona. It does take place a lot in Arizona. But that's a great, good book. My favorite book in college was In the Heart of the Sea by Nathaniel Philbrook. It's I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. They made a movie about it. It's about these people on the USS Essex who are basically lost at sea because a whale T-bones essentially their ship, and it's the inspiration for Moby Dick. It's a real life story. Crazy good book. I'm trying to think of other books that people might like. But any Cormac McCarthy book, like I won't say anything bad about that. Like all those books I've read all those books. Those are all fascinating. If you're really big into like history and stuff like that, like I said, I'm a really big history buff. The Game of the Foxes. That's a really good book. It's about espionage in World War II. But yeah, there's pretty much there's a lot of good books out there. I feel like when you ask me my favorite book, it's like when you ask somebody their favorite song, and I forget every song I've ever listened to, and I just feel like I've never listened to music. But yeah, I mean, those are the genres that I kind of read, and I've been reading a lot of online stuff too, just like health stuff and things like that. I'm a really big fan of Ben Greenfield. Online, he has a lot of really good health related stuff, like recipes, cooking, and things like that I've taken a lot from. But yeah,
Yeah, that's super insightful, and I think that's a lot of there's quite a few books that people can check out and kind of get a sense of like what you've been reading and what you enjoy. So I think that's great. As far as kind of hearing you talk about that, hearing you talk about your interests, and kind of where your head's at with training. Have you thought about, after weightlifting, what that looks like in terms of, when I retire from the sport, I'm going to coach, I'm going to work with, Alex and Shahin, I'm going to change professions altogether. Like, what are your thoughts on what you do when you kind of hang up your belt?
um, you know, a lot of it depends too on whether or not the Olympics is in weightlifting is in the Olympics in
Right.
2028. That's kind of the thing that everybody's holding their breath to find out or not. But as far as like when I'm done weightlifting, I'd like to still be involved in weightlifting. I don't know if that would be coaching or something like that. I work right now as a contractor for a roofing company. So, I mean, I don't really have anything that I'm like doing as far as work where I really feel like I'd just be like go full force on that as soon as I am done lifting. If I have the ability to stay involved in weightlifting, then that would be what I would want. If that is staying with Alex and Shahin and just staying here in Phoenix and just like growing the team with them, or if that's, being a USA weightlifting coach or something like that. I don't really know what that entails. A lot of it will just have to determine where my life is at that point. But I don't really see myself. I'm going to try to make teams until I can't. Even if I'm not like a number one guy, I'm going to still try to make as many teams as possible until I physically can't make teams. So, I don't know how long that'll be. Maybe it'll be a long time, or maybe I'll get done after 2028 and never lift again.
Yeah.
Who knows? I thought I was going to swim still when I stopped swimming, and I think I've swam 3 times in the last like 7 years. So,
Wow.
like, you never know. I told myself I was going to swim like twice a week to stay in somewhat shape, and then I just never went back. So I mean, I've told myself that before, but I mean, with weightlifting, I've always loved being, strong. I've always loved lifting weights, so I don't really see myself ever not being involved in weightlifting in some capacity.
No, that makes sense. And I didn't know you actually had a job outside of weightlifting, because I know you do like stuff online, and I'm sure you probably have personal training clients too, but I didn't know you had something outside of the sport.
Yeah, that's just something I've been doing the last couple months. Just, it doesn't impact my schedule. I'm just super flexible, like make your own schedule job. So, I just, not knowing what the next couple of years are going to bring, like I said, I'm getting married and stuff like that. So just, if it works out, it does. If not, then, I might just go heavier into coaching and stuff like that. But thankfully, it hasn't bothered my weightlifting at all. So until it bothers my weightlifting, I'll probably just, be doing stuff, outside of weightlifting just to keep myself busy.
Yeah, and for people who listen to this and they think, well, I want to be coached by the strongest weightlifter in the United States. Where can they actually go to reach out or to inquire about coaching?
They can just reach out to me on Instagram. My username is Keiser_Keiser, which is K-A. I've gotten more questions about that, I think, in my weightlifting career than anything else. But it's KAISER_KEISER, just to keep it nice and simple.
What is the backstory on that? Is it just
When I made my Instagram page, I didn't think that I would ever be inquired about it. So when I made it with my 5 followers, KAISER is like the traditional way of spelling my name, and that's also the German word for king. So it was like King Kaiser, Kaiser.
That's actually really clever.
In my head it sounded really cool, but
awesome. Yeah, and for everyone listening, go reach out to Keiser if you're looking for coaching. If you want to follow me, I'm on Instagram at Josh_PhilWL. I'm online at Philosophical Weightlifting everywhere else. You can obviously support the show sponsors, Virus, Onyx, and Weightlifting House with the code PHILWL. Hopefully you guys enjoyed learning more about Keiser, and we will catch you next week on another episode of the podcast.